Yes, it has started, Madam.
Started, yeah. Okay. So yes, today basically we are here to get some basics about code review standards in .NET, which are recommended to follow. So our key takeaways would be code formatting, naming convention, exception handling, code reusability, code commenting, and how like where should we use enums and constants. So basically, we all know that we should follow the coding standards, but unfortunately we forget or we ignore while we are completing our task, or we are most stuck in the requirement and and all that stuff, and we just need to do the we just need to complete the code. So so basically why we should follow the coding standards. So everybody can write the code, but we need to write an effective code. So what there is a term in technical language that is code smell. So what is code smell? Code smell is basically uh, uh, it describes our quality of code. So if our code is a bit ugly, it is comments are every day, every year and there. Our code is not formatted properly, or our naming conventions are not followed. So this comes under code smells, which there are many reasons for that, like duplicate code, methods are too big, classes are having many instances. Uh, there are too long classes, too long methods. So to avoid all this, we should make the habit of coding standards. And the most important is our overall cost of our code is like development cost and maintenance cost. And most of the time, when mostly the bigger projects which have a huge maintenance cost. So what does that means? Our existing code is reuse. We are reusing that, or there are some existing issues which need to be solved. Like there are overnight requests which need to be analyzed, and we need to give and we need to solve that within within a day. So if our code is written in a proper way, so that would help the team, as well as whenever we are enhancing our feature which we have worked on, the same code will help us. And as we know, not only one developer will work on that particular code of piece. It will like every developer in the team will somehow will go and will reuse that code which we have written. So basically, for that basic reasons, we should follow coding standards. The first thing is coding format. So uh, we have already have enough. We are fortunate, like we are working in Visual Studio and they have default coding standards, and which is already there in the Visual Studio. So we should not change firstly that which is their default. So first I will go to the Visual Studio for one of. Give me a minute. I will reshare my screen. So there are different tools through which we can uh, follow the coding formats, or we can set the code format. So one of the few of the maybe few of them which you were already aware, like we in Harbinger we are using Code Analyzer, StyleCorp, Sonar Cubes, which are like basically big projects use this for all the to follow the coding standards. But there is one more feature which is there in Visual Studio 2019, and I guess everybody is using Visual Studio 2019, so which can be enabled from here. So in tools, options, if we go in text editor and below that C# code style, so we can generate a config file, editor config file, which will set all the default format which are suggested by Microsoft. So here is the file which I already have in my solution. So here you can see all the formatting things are already present here. So we can just follow this. So in case if there are sometimes projects have different preferences, so we can change it accordingly here, or we can add the rules here, so that while development we will try to avoid these issues. So basically how this will help. So now let's say there's one coding format rule that every comment should be below the actual code. So here's the let's say I make some changes. So if I go here, like here you can see everybody can see the Visual Studio, right? Can somebody answer? Yes, yeah. So if we can see this option, run code cleanup, which is introduced in Visual Studio 2019. So we can just click on this and our code will be formatted. And there are few more shortcuts like control KF, control KD. So this all things which we should regularly do while the development. And let's say if we want to configure some, so now this as you can see in profile one, we have this two default fixers like using should be sorted and remove unnecessary using. We can also add few more fixers from here. So if I say remove unused variables, if I create any variable, it's a test variable, and I don't use this. So as you see, I have configured here profiler, which is profile 2. Let's say if I'm creating a profiler for my project specific, so that would help. So here we can click and run code cleanup profile. So what it will do, it has cleared the unused variable. So we have to just be careful, but this thing will definitely help us for the code formatting purpose. Okay, we'll move 2 slides. So most of the things would be handled at the Visual Studio itself, but the few which are like very important, I have mentioned here that there should be only one class per file. That class name and the file name should be similar. We should use the namespaces alphabetically, and the system namespaces that are like using system, so using system dot text, that should be placed before the our project namespaces. We should always use tabs for the indentation instead of spaces. And if we are using spaces, then one tab equals to 4 spaces. So that our formats doesn't get disturbed. So for that purpose, comment should be in the same level as the code, the one I showed in the example, which is also recommended by the .NET people. We should declare all the member variables at the top of the class and static variables at very top. So this is something we can uh, have the preference as per the project. This is not something which we should, but there should be some standards which should be defined by project itself, which will which should be gone over, like which should be shared by all the developers, using single space before and after each of operator in bracket. This is something, if we are not giving that space, you must have seen that it looks clumsy. This is also recommended. This is also an error in the style cop. So these were the few code formatting things which I have discussed, and rest you can also check in that editor config, which will help you to uh, to follow this coding format. So now in this example, we can see like there are in this site on the left hand, you can see uh, a, uh, there's a method which is a big method, but at first glance, we cannot understand what it is written. So, and at every time a developer doesn't, a developer which is not developing this code, this method, but has to use, doesn't need to uh, know everything about the internal code. So on the left hand, you can see if we just refactor it and have a clean code, like have a another method, private method, add element. So in this way, it is more easier to understand the code. So this is one of the things we should have methods smaller and precise, so that if a developer wants to go and know actual internal code, so he or she can just go in the particular method and just check. Okay. So the second thing is, which is most important, is naming convention. So why we should follow the naming convention first? It makes the program understandable, easier to read. If we perhaps most a logical flow can be understood if a naming convention is followed. So make sure you have a long enough meaningful names, but not uh, but avoid that wordy names like unnecessary, like employ for permanent and kind of. So it should be meaningful, but it can be long enough but meaningful. So these are few standards which we should follow while naming. Our class name, interface, namespace, enum, all should be in the Pascal case and should be a noun. No plurals. Um we should not give generic type names such as message, log, or element. This is because they can get conflict with built-in names of .NET. Names of method should be again Pascal case, but verbs, which will be self-explanatory. So let's say if the name is get employees, so we can easily understand like the function will get all the employees from the database or from the particular database. And if it is returning Boolean value, so we can use can. Okay, so avoid meaningless names like start processing. So if I'm a new developer, I would not understand what is start processing. So have some meaningful name, like if I want to parse XML file, so instead of start processing, we can use parse XML file, or instead of fill data, like in the particular domain that could be many entities like employees, supervisors, or candidates, but what is fill data? So in that case, we can have a proper name like fill employee data or fill candidate data, kind of. Okay. So our parameters, variables should be in camel case. Camel case means first letter of word should be smaller. and the rest words can be caps. So in this example, we can see D is cap smaller, and the next word name is N is capital. Avoid using abbreviation. So like shortcuts for DMT. Like as I said before, like there should be meaningful name. Department ka shortcut DMT should not be used. So we can, there's an exception which is defined by the Microsoft itself. We can use abbreviation only uh, when these are the few exceptions like XML, FTP, URL, which are self-explanatory. So we can use here, but not most of the places. Do not use Hungarian notations because this was previously used in C, C++, but this should not be followed in .NET. Do not use screaming caps. That means all the letters of word or variable name should will be caps. That is too annoying for reading as well. So when we say Pascal case, it should be like first letter of variable should be caps, and the second, like each word uh, each word first letter should be caps. Do use prefix for interface. Do use I as a prefix for interface, which will be easier to understand. Use singular names for enums as well as for classes namespace. Don't use plural names. Give name which reflect the intention of member. So that means let's say we saw the example. Let's say we saw the example that was field data. So we cannot understand what that means. So we should have a proper naming. So the second one, there is a thumb rule that wider the scope, lengthier the name. So this can be seen in this example. So there is a list which is named as employer. So it should be given as a proper name. But the scope of this variable, that is where E is within this for each. So we can have a shorter name. So E is fine for this purpose. But if we give decimal instead of total, if we give T, that would be difficult if it is a linear method, or if it is a smaller method also, we didn't know what means T. So try to give a lengthier name wherever required and narrow names where the scope is less. Okay. I hope it is clear up till now. Am I too fast? Okay. So let's move to next topic, that is code reusability. So basically, most of the bugs in the projects are due to the repetitive code. So let's consider one example. Like in our project, we need to validate some entity. Let's say validate employee. So that piece of code, that validation would be similar for complete project, but each time, like while creating, while editing, or while doing some other operation, each time we use that validate code multiple times. So we can avoid that, and we can write some common code and common methods which can be used within the application and not within only within the classes. So there are some more things like magic strings, like if employee status equal to 2. So now let's say I don't know what that 2 means. So, but that to find that value of that 2, that we need to go to database. We have to check that what that means. That is a big uh, big heck. So we should always use enums for that. so that the constants are defined in the solution itself, so that it are readable. So let's see a few examples. Let's consider this example. On the left side, you can see there are two functions which are performing some same operations, like let's say accept order and cancel order. In these two functions, only difference is the second call, that is send command 8. So now rest all two for now are same, like initial and terminal. So we can avoid this repetitive code and we can create the constant and we can use in the below example. So it can be refactored in this way. But do you think is it fine, or we can like do more refactoring? So still this is not fine because these are two which can be reused. So what we can do, we can create a separate method as execute command, and we can pass the command which is not common, and then we can reduce this, and we can reduce this call and call in this way, execute command. So we have refactored the code and have a more enhanced way. But every time duplicate code is not a bad thing. So the reason behind that. So most of the time when we say duplicate code, how we can avoid duplicate code. So one thing come in the mind is like we can create a share library. So let's consider we have three applications of same domain and there are some common functionalities. And then the first thought comes is like we can have a shared library. So let's say I have created one share library to validate the employee. And in that share library, this is the way we validate, like it should be permanent and the age should be greater than 25. So this one validation code is used by three applications within the same domain. So then comes the first request from the first application, like I need to check salary as well. So let's say I added one more uh, parameter, that is project ID. So that like 1, 2, and 3 are the like three projects. So from the second project, I got the request. So I have added one more if, and then if that is project ID 2, then check this whether salary is greater than 25 and return to. So that means this code is only specific to project 2, but it is in the shared library, which is not correct because it will increase cyclometric complexity as well. Then a second request come from different project from the same domain. So let's say from project 3, there comes one more request, that is I should also check whether email ID is valid or not. So here comes and our code get extended. So it is every time it is not good to use the shared library also. So what we can do in that case, we can have a common library within a particular project, or we can say if a particular application. So if I say validate employee, that can be used in, that can be have a common library used only for that particular application and not within all the projects. So that is again a bad idea for code reusability. So here comes one more example. So this is the ename which we have created, and has been used in many classes and many methods. So in case in this example, we can see that it is used in two methods. So if any of the behavior change come in this employee enum, or if in a particular value of the, like for the manager, I have to do particular changes, so I have to change it to all the classes, or sorry, all the classes as well methods where this enum is used. So to solve this problem, what we can use open close principle here. So what we can do, we can create a class instead of enum, and we can define abstract methods, and instead of enum, we can have a different classes particular, like for HR we can have a HR class which will have a base class as employee, and further it can describe define the methods accordingly. Okay, so just for the few examples of code reusability. So we'll move further for code commenting. So why code commenting is very important, which is mostly ignored. So if a code is commented properly, it would be easier for us to understand what is the actual intention of method or actual intention of class. So we should always focus on the code commenting best practices. So I'll have few comments on that, like few things we'll discuss about that. Like avoid incorrect comments. It is it is good if we don't comment, but it should not be incorrect. Like I have a variable employee ID, and in the comments it is showing like employee status, which will make the developer confused. So it's better to know to avoid comment instead of incorrect comments. Avoid over commenting. Give, like, many times what we do, like let's say in this example, if age is greater than 18, so we don't need comments here. So we can avoid here. So it's good to avoid the comments and give the comments at the appropriate places. If the variables or conditions are self-explanatory, there is no need of comment. Similarly, in this example, so a developer can easily understand, like the code will go further if the age is greater than 18. We should always have XML commenting. So what does that mean? XML commenting is basically used in while we are giving comments for methods. So let's say we have a method, and we have, I'll just share my screen. So this is called XML. This is one of the example of XML commenting. So we should always have a comment over our methods. What is our method doing? This is incomplete. Basically, we have to give a comment like what this parameter is doing, what the second parameter, and a proper comment it is going to do, but it should be short enough. Okay. We don't need internal comments. That means within the methods to explain the logic. But wherever it is required, like there is a condition which is not self-explanatory, then we should give that comments for the complex logic. So what are the standards which we should follow while code commenting? That is, place the comment on the separate line and not in the end of the code. That means, let's say, uh, instead of here, I have like we can give comment here also, which is incorrect. It should be always above the code. Comment should always start with uppercase letter. So end the comment with period, and there should be a space between this comment line and the first word. This is also a part of that code formatting which we need to follow. And basically why this is required, because it is easy to read. Now these are the few examples of bad commenting. As I've already told, this comment is not required. This is self-explanatory. Again, this here itself, if we have a create employee method, and method is already, we can understand like validate employee will validate the employee. We don't need a separate comment here, which will make the code more clumsy. So it's better not to comment in this way. So yeah, this were the few things regarding code commenting. Comment should add some value to the code, and it should not randomly make just we need to follow the protocol and we are just commenting the code. That should not be done. Comments which describe internal details, I mean the comment should be given describe the internal details where the names cannot express the code. So basically the one where we have seen the method, above the method we have XML documentations, that XML comment, that is because we cannot get the internal details of method. So at all that places we should use commenting. So the next topic is exception handling. So again, exception handling is taken lightly. We mostly don't follow this protocol. So basically what are exception? Exception are type of errors that occurs during the execution of application. Why we should do exception handling? To avoid application, uh, to avoid the application to crash, or if there is some unexpected exception, then it should be logged so that for further troubleshooting, it would be easier. Again, exception handling is basically very useful for the maintenance team, which are basically working on overnight requests. So if proper exception handling is there and the proper it is properly logged in the files, the most happier people are the maintenance people. So these are the few things we should follow while exception handling. We should have basic logging, log conceptual data, aggregate logs, proactive use logs, custom logging. So what is basic logging basically? So we use try catch and we don't write anything in the catch, which is uh, there is no use. It should not be that basic. Again, we just having exception E and then we just log that error, which would again not help anyways for further troubleshoot. So basically, while exception handling, it should be more precise first, like in this, yeah, anybody. So basically, we should have a specific specific exception handle first and then generic one. So let's see in this example. So we are checking like whether the web exception status is error, then it will if the exception is about that, it will be logged in. If not, if page is not found, it will go in this catch. If some internal server, it will go there. If any of this catch is not there, then we should have this catch so that it will log the generic exception. But specific exception logging should be there. Now, here in this, we can see some bad examples and good examples for exception logging. So many times we just in the exception we log validation failed or validation failed form. So instead of writing in this way, we can have more precise context, which will help further to understand for actually which field or which class or which method the error is there. So as here we can see, it is more precise. Like for each field, there must be a number and so on. Similarly, we also log the things. The process logging is also there. So let's say there are multiple stages of the method and we log one by one. So it should be more precise again, like uh, at what stage our method is. Instead of just a process, we can have the job ID and a proper text as well. So these are the few points which we should follow while exception handling. Log file location, it is very important because that should be accessible to all the developers basically when it is there on the servers. So it should not be within the bin directory or something, which not which is not accessible by everyone. So that is important. Whether we should use single log file or multiple files. And many a times we create a single file and all logs are inserted in that. And one day that log file size is too large and it is difficult to check that log file because it takes times to. So we should always follow one prototype. Like we should create a log file for each date. That would be easier. Like if I want to troubleshoot some error or some exception for yesterday, I can just find out by using the date filter. We should also use Windows event log, which will help us to have more detailed logs for errors, especially on productions. So these are the few things we should specifically have if our project is on production. We should receive a notification whenever error happens. So there are many third-party logging uh, tools which can be used to get the regular notification if any exception is occurred. So again, we can aggregate some similar error in the group and we can set we can have that emails like for that particular particular group have some more priority, so that we can set accordingly that. Catch more specific exception first, which we have already seen here, like in this example. More specific one the first, and afterward the generic ones. And log exception, this is obvious, but we sometimes ignore. We just have try catch, but we don't log the exception, which is which might have a incorrect assumption to the user that our method is successfully run, but it is not. And we don't have log also. Let's say if we want to find the root case, so it is always uh, compulsory to add the log here. And basically avoid exceptions. So most of the exceptions, if you would see, would be the null reference exceptions, which can be avoided. Like in this example, we can see we have already added we have created a variable where we have already taken it as null, and then in the further code we have used a dot city, like we are iterating the address, but this will get fail and log the exception. So this can be avoided. So if we are giving null as a default value for some variable, so we have to then uh, check in all the iterations. For let's say for in this example, so we have to iterate it again here. This can be avoided. Okay. So our last topic is use enum and constants. Now, where all we need this enums and constants, basically to avoid magic values. And what is magic values? Like the values, like we are just using the string. Instead of that, we can have the constant and we can use it across the class or across the application. So for that reasons, we can use constant. So uh, basically to follow this, constant is basically a compile time value, and it cannot be changed. The variable value cannot be changed. So we can do one thing: we can create a separate class and declare all the constant in that, and that constants can be used across the application. So in that case, let's say month, in this example, let's say month cannot be increased, like 13 months cannot be there. So this can be added in constant class, and that can be used across the application. So while writing the constant, we should always use Pascal keys, and it should be public uh, whenever declared in a class. And if it is declared within a class, then we can use camel keys. So what are enums? Like enum is again then a group of constants which can again help a lot. Let's say instead of writing magic values like employee type equal to 1, now we don't know what 1 means. So to avoid that, we can again write the enums which have a proper structure, then which are more readable. While writing the enums, then uh, we can we should always have a value 0. The first default value should be 0, so that it avoids to break. There are few benefits of enum. It increase readability. it can replace the magic numbers. It helps in iterating. As I said, if I create an enum of, let's say, employee status, and I want to iterate the employee status instead of writing it in a separately, we can use the enums. It reduces the errors uh, and assure the forward compatibility. Instead of constant, then there are multiple constants. We can have just a set of constant, that is enum. Okay, that's it from my side. Thank you. Any questions? Thanks, guys. Then, if nobody has any questions.
Hello.
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 Yeah.
This is Adarsh actually.
Yeah.
Uh, Actually, we are storing constants inside the class, right? Class is actually a reference type. So can't we store that inside the struct?
Instead of
We are storing constant values inside the class, right? So
mhm.
can't we store that inside the struct?
in in structure, you mean?
Uh,
Are we using structure still? Like,
I mean, in Swift we are using structure. So actually,
since
Swift. Actually,
so I'm not sure about that.
okay, because class is reference type. So suppose if there is no values, then it may cases memory issues. So
Hmm.
that's all.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, then I'll stop the recording and thank you, everyone.